This is the Continuum Lab. I'm Jeppe, musician, maker and your host on this visit. Today's video is the first in my new series titled Beyond the Prototype. And this is the prototype, the latest open horn prototype from my open horn MIDI system. Now in today's video I'll be focusing mainly on what's wrong with this prototype, so I will be looking at all of the little and not so little imperfections that I hope to be improving on as I go ahead and build some more iterations of the open horn. My previous video series was tightly scripted so that all of the videos could be made very short and I could get you up to speed on the open horn MIDI system project as quickly as possible. But from now on there is no script. We'll be following along in the construction of the open horn more or less in real time, and so I might seem to rattle on a little bit more, the videos will be longer and things might seem a little less clearly thought through. I hope you can live with that and that you still understand what's going on as we dive into the details of the open horn MIDI system. But first, a short disclaimer.
The continuum has no end and no beginning. It represents the sum total of all knowledge, stretching from the unnoticeably small and to the incomprehensibly vast. So the Continuum Lab is not really a physical space at all. I think of it as a state of mind, like a mental leap of faith from the comfortable platform of the known and into the infinite ignorance, where learning is the only method of propulsion. Welcome to the Continuum Lab.
If you've seen any of the videos in my previous video series about the open horn MIDI system, then you'll know that I am terribly proud of this current open horn prototype. It is the 12th functional prototype of this instrument. You can see some of the earlier versions in the previous video series, specifically chapter 5. There have been many more iterations, failed attempts and concepts and so on, but this is the result of that long process of development over almost 5 years, and I feel like it's at a point now where I'm ready to show it to the public in a more official way than I have so far. So what I mean by that basically is that I want to try to sell some of these. So before I can do that, I need to have an honest look at some of the imperfections in this current prototype and see what needs to be improved, what needs to be perfected before I can put it up for sale. So let's have a look at it. So, moment of truth. Please be gentle in the comments. I know that some of these details are just terribly ugly. I'm here to fix them. So the first thing I want to show you is the side keys, because they're basically right now the ugliest thing on the whole open horn. So let's get the up close camera right up close and have a look at them. So as you can see, they're made from epoxy putty that is just put into some actual holes in the bamboo without any sort of support. There are metal contacts underneath, and you can see some of them poking through where I've had to sand. The result is terrible. There are jagged edges. I damaged the bamboo around them. It is totally unacceptable. So my solution for that will be to use the same kind of printed base that I do for the main keys here, which gives for a much more pleasing look and is much easier to execute. I'm thinking that I should go with the small one, and so these keys will have that kind of aesthetic instead. Also, there are going to be 6 of these, so I'll expand it up by 1 and down by 1 instead of the 4. I'll explain why in a second. So that's actually really easy to fix. I'm simply going to use some of the elements that I already have for the main keys, and that's going to work just great for the side keys. On the other side of the instrument we have the 2 touch sliders, so let's have a look at those. So again, here on the touch sliders, as was the case on the side keys, I was going for a more organic look, something that perhaps felt a bit more like part of the wood than the printed parts allow for, but obviously that didn't really work out. So I hand applied this epoxy. It turned out really ugly, so then I sanded it down and tried to apply some more, and it basically got even worse, and I just decided to leave it in the state that you see here. So the 2 sliders actually still work, although not terribly well, because the thickness of the epoxy is uneven, and so the measurements on the individual sensors is also uneven. Another thing that's going to change in upcoming builds of the open horn is that there's going to be only one touch slider instead of the two that you see on here. So I consider the touch sliders and the side keys part of the same group of sensors on the open horn, and there are 12 sensors in total. So on this open horn prototype I'm using 4 sensors here, and then 4 and 4 for a total of 12 sensors. But instead I'm going to use 6 on this side for the side keys and 6 sensors in the single touch slider. So this will give a higher resolution and better stability of the slider, but it'll also be much easier to manage, as it turns out that it's very hard to control these 2 sliders in a predictable manner with your left thumb sort of underneath your hand like this. So instead I'm going to have the single slider there, and it's going to be much easier to actually use for practical purposes. So don't get me wrong, I love the epoxy putty, and apart from the fact that I messed up the application of it here in the side keys and the sliders, it really is a pretty good solution. Its main function is to act as a dielectric material in between your finger and the metal contact, which is the capacitive sensor in each key, and it does a great job of this. So if there is one problem with it, it's that applying it by hand like I do, it's pretty hard to control the exact thickness of the layer of putty on top of the metal underneath. And so I had to actually sand some of these keys down to the point where a little bit of the solder, which is on one corner of the metal sensor, is showing through here. Now this is not a problem for the functionality, but it would be a problem for the durability of the sensor, because now humidity could possibly get underneath the layer of putty and start to eat away at the metal of the sensor or the contact with the cable, and so that would not be good. But they do work quite fine in their current form, but I do hope to improve them somewhat for the this next batch of open horns. So my main idea is to change the epoxy putty in the keys for 2-part epoxy resin, which is a transparent liquid solution where I would dip the key into and then allow it to drip off till there was just the thinnest of epoxy layers left, and then dry like that and set, and that would be very durable. Also, it would be kind of shiny and maybe nice. You would be able to see the metal contact through it, and it would conform to the surface of whatever soldered bumps or any little creases or anything that might not be perfectly smooth in the contact itself, and so there wouldn't necessarily be such a big issue with thickness of the layer. So I will also be trying to make a new iteration of the epoxy putty key, because I do really quite like the aesthetic of it. It's matte, it fits really nicely on the bamboo, and so that's something that I'm definitely going to be doing. Okay, so far so good. We've established that there's still some improvements to be made to the epoxy part of the instrument, but what about the other main plastic element, the 3D prints? Let's have a look at those. So what we're looking at here is the mouthpiece of the open horn. As you can see, the 3D printed pieces are not quite up to professional standards. There's a little bit of layer separation in some places, and they're generally a little bit rough around the edges. Also, there's this horrible residue of the epoxy that I used to finish off my hinge solution for the pitch bend sensor. Now, since printing these pieces, I've actually upgraded my 3D printer with a brand new nozzle, with an improved solution for ventilating the hot end while printing, as well as some other fine tunings and adjustments. So I think the print quality issues might already have been, if not solved, then certainly greatly improved. But be that as it may, if it turns out to be very important to potential buyers that their open horn not display the typical layer lines from the FDM printing process, then I could certainly order some professional prints using a more fancy technology to get some pieces with a better finish. It would not improve the functionality at all, but you know, it might turn out to be important to people. I don't know. I certainly like the aesthetic of these pieces just the way they are. Especially as the rest of the body is from this organic material, which also has lines and fibers in it. As for the belly section of the open horn, it is also fully 3D printed and consists of 4 main pieces, here, 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 and here. This modular design makes it very easy to adapt the 4-piece setup to a slightly longer or shorter piece of bamboo. So I'm very happy with the way that functionality turned out. However, the pieces themselves are slightly lacking in aesthetic qualities, so I think a slight improvement that I might have achieved on the print quality is going to help somewhat, but I also want to try to make them a little bit more streamlined so that they better follow the contour of the bamboo itself. Another aspect of the belly section of the open horn which still needs a little bit of work are the fixtures. As you can see here, there are 3 screws which basically hold everything in place, and then the end pieces here are basically wedged each underneath a little edge here at the end of the instrument. And this works quite well. I mean, they're certainly not going to fall out spontaneously, they don't rattle around or anything like that, but they're not perfectly fixed, and it's not the strongest solution. So a different design of the interior of this has occurred to me since building this. I'm going to slightly change the pieces into which these screws are fixed, thereby improving the strength and stability of the belly section as a whole. And so those are the main misgivings that I still have about this current open horn prototype. They don't represent by a long shot everything that I think could possibly be improved about this instrument, but they are certainly the most important flaws, and they are also the flaws that I intend to fix in this upcoming production run where I will be making a few open horns. But before I go and make a few open horns, I have some shopping to do. So in the next video I will start working my way down the bill of materials of the open horn and hopefully give you a little bit of insight into my criteria in selecting these materials. Specifically I'll be shopping for bamboo and plastic for my 3D printer. See you there.